Why we're running it. UK doesn't get new cars with factory-fit LPG tanks. So we're using a dual-fuel Sandero to find out what are we missing. Month 1, Month 2, Month 3 specs. Life with a Sandero stepway LPG. Month 3 counting the miles as well as the pennies. The 11th of October 2017. The wealth, or rather the dearth, of LPG motoring has been shared around Autocar HQ in recent weeks, as others begin to discover that the curious Dacia with the Dutch number plates doesn't bite. News editor Rachel Burgess grabbed the keys to see how different a Dacia Sandero is to drive on LPG from one running on petrol. What's most remarkable about the Dacia is how unremarkable it is, she came back saying. I was constantly trying to find ways in which it was different to drive from a non-LPG one but never managed it. I expected it to feel heavier due to the extra fuel tank and slower extra weight, but it just felt the same. Nick Hackett, former Autocar road tester and now editor of our sister title Pistonheads, check it out at pistonheads.com, went one further and broke the seal on the hallowed tank of petrol, not used since the Sandero LPG arrived. I rather liked the seamless transition to the stepway's conventional reserve. It made the potential range seem colossal, said Nick, but the eventual requirement for consecutive goes at separate pumps does rather reinsert the strife. Back on the subject of pumps, I mentioned last time about a bad experience with one of the newer kinds of pump at a shell I found on the A316 near Autocar's office. The nozzles struggled to fit onto the car and then the GOT adapter stuck on when refueling was eventually done. I blamed myself. Well, Rachel had the same problem with the same pump. It didn't work, she said. My partner and I both persisted for 20 minutes before giving up and heading to another garage. Rachel had another observation that tallies with my own. The indicator of how much gas is left in the tank gives about as straight an answer as a politician on Question Time. How did my first ever attempt at filling up the LPG-fueled Dacia go? Take a guess. pic.twitter.com ORWCH1 Lee, Rachel Burgess at The Burgeword, September 17, 2017. I put in only 10 pounds of fuel to a tank that was almost empty, yet when I got back behind the wheel, it said the LPG tank was full, she said. My guess is that the LPG indicator is not an awfully fair measure of how much LPG remains in the tank. SHE's right on that, but the office consensus on the available range from a tank of LPG is around 200,000 to 250 miles, depending on how brave you're feeling when the red light on the little tank indicator comes on. Last word to Nick, who donned his road test flat cap one last time for his appraisal of the rest of the Sandero's manners. For all the practical limitations presented by our stepway, the intransigent pumps, the southpaw steering wheel, the airport car park confounding number plate, it's worth reiterating what a happy and contented car the underlying model really is, he said. I drove it back from Luton one night, after midnight, after a flight and after very little sleep, and although the steering may be as slow as oak tree growth, the Dacia's pulpy, affable ride and squidgy seats make it almost impossible to complain about. Mileage 1592. Back to the top. Life with a Sandero stepway LPG. Month 2 counting the miles as well as the pennies. The 6th of September 2017. My first credit card bill since I took ownership of the LPG powered Sandero stepway has landed, and it makes for happy reading. Which is good news, given that I signed off my first report on the car last month by noting this was the long-term test of the calculator and credit card as much as the car itself, to assess the viability of LPG as a fuel to help improve the UK's air quality problem and save motorists a few quid in the process. We've had 2 brims of the 40-litre tank so far, a 28.17-litre fill that took me 213 miles, and a 30.76-litre replenishment that got me 234 miles. Those fills were both carried out when the red warning light was illuminated on the LPG tank indicator, backing up some internet research that suggested Dacia has quite a creative interpretation of the amount of gas remaining. Each time, LPG cost 58.9 pence per litre, meaning that the fills came in at £16.59 and £18.12 respectively. That means it costs £34.71 to travel 447 miles at an economy rate of 34.5 mpg. So how does that compare with a petrol-powered equivalent? As luck would have it, our sister magazine What Car also has a Dacia Sandero, albeit in non-stepway spec, on long-term test. Using the same 89 bhp 0.9-litre 3-cylinder engine, it is averaging 43 mpg. The economy in an LPG car is always worse, due to the fuel having a lower calorific value, but given that petrol has averaged around £1.15 per litre over the same period, the fuel cost of £54.35 to travel the same distance in a petrol Sandero leaves you an extra £20 out of pocket. However, it's worth noting that the petrol Sandero would have done close to that distance between fills, rather than the more frequent stops needed in the LPG car. When those fills have been needed, it has been fairly easy to find LPG fuel pumps so far, one always having a welcome habit of creeping up on a roundabout just in time for the tank to run completely dry, if that's the right term. I've encountered the pumps at only Shell filling stations so far, although it's worth noting that Shell isn't the only fuel company with LPG pumps. While at Shell, though, I have come across two types of LPG pump. One I explained about in the first report, a simple push-on, twist and lock type, but a new push-on and clamp-over device has also now emerged. It is supposed to be easier to use. Well, I faffed around with it long enough for the assistant in the filling station's shop to have to come out and show me how it is done. Maybe my struggle was because, being a model intended to be sold to Dutch buyers, our Sandero stepway's fuel tank needs an adapter screwed over the inlet so it can be filled up using UC-spec LPG pumps. My pump fail was complete when this adapter subsequently got stuck. A pair of pliers and brute force was needed to remove it back at the office. Still, I'll put all these down to lessons learned and teething trouble, because the bottom line so far is this: the LPG-powered Sandero is proving much cheaper to run than its petrol equivalent, and the network of LPG pumps has not yet left us short and caused us to switch to the backup petrol tank. Mileage $13.99. Back to the top life with the Sandero Stepway LPG. Month 1 welcoming the LPG Sandero to our fleet. The 2nd of August 2017. It's something we've all cast an envious eye at before the third entry at the bottom of an illuminated fuel prices sign. The one at Cobham Services near Junction 10 of the M25 read 58.9 pence per litre when I went to pick up this Dacia Sandero Stepway with a difference for our long-term test fleet. That's the price of a litre of autogas, the brand name for the most common form of LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, you'll find in the UK. That makes it about half the price of a litre of petrol or diesel, or, in other words, rather appealing financially. Despite a push at the turn of the century, however, LPG has not taken off in the UK. Unlike on the continent, no cars with a factory-fitted LPG tank are sold here, meaning a conversion is the only way to go if you want to drive on the cheapest fuel available on UK forecourts. The gas industry wants to change that and is trying to get LPG back on the agenda as a here-and-now solution to the UK's well-publicised and pressing air quality problems. With the government vowing to ban sales of new petrols and diesels in 2040, the LPG lobby argues that the infrastructure is already in place to support a less polluting fuel that can make an immediate difference to air quality at a palatable cost. So, to that end, we're running the Sandero Stepway for 6 months to find out how well an LPG-powered car works in Britain in 2017. You'll notice our car has Dutch number plates and the steering wheel on the wrong side. Because manufacturers do not sell LPG-powered cars directly to new car buyers in the UK, we decided against a conversion and popped over the channel where they do sell them. A UK car buyer's missing out, that's one of the things we'll be finding out. So why a Sandero? Well, it's the epitome of cheap motoring. The cheapest fuel on sale in the UK, in the cheapest car. Or in the words of Dacia's Dutch website, run through Google Translate, what is even smarter than a Dacia LPG? We had a Sandero on our fleet when it was launched, so are well versed in its simple charms, which haven't diminished in the intervening period. This time it's a Sandero Stepway, which is raised by 40mm compared to the standard car, has extra kit and looks more rugged. There's not much difference in how they drive, although the Sandero Stepway has a softer ride. The engine powering the car is the familiar 89 bhp 0.9-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder unit from myriad Dacia and Renault models. Our car has the same 50-litre petrol tank as Sandero's sold over here and will happily run on petrol all day as normal, but in addition has an LPG tank. It is 40 litres in capacity and sits in the boot in the space where a spare wheel would be. The tank is round and unobtrusive, robbing no obvious usable boot capacity, and is a world away from the mental image of aftermarket LPG conversions that leave the car's boot filled with gas cylinders. The obvious difference is when you look behind the fuel filler cap. Next to the conventional petrol one is a smaller cap for the LPG. In the UK you need to screw a supplied adapter into the LPG filling neck each time you refill because pumps vary according to territory. To refill, you slot the pump over the adapter, turn 90 degrees to lock it, pull the handle on the pump and latch it on, and then press the button on the dispenser to start filling. It's really not as complicated as it sounds and dispenses fuel at the speed of the slower petrol pumps you might find on an older forecourt. Just watch out for the pump making you jump with a big release of pressure when you unlatch the handle afterwards. There's only one difference inside between an LPG-powered Sandero compared to a regular one: a little low-tech dial next to the gear lever. The dial indicates how much fuel is left in the LPG tank and tells you whether you're running on petrol or LPG, with the option to switch between the two. We have a full tank of petrol on board for emergencies but don't plan to use it during the car's 6 months here. This would all be a bit pointless, wouldn't it? The fuel is cheap, then, so what of the car compared to a standard Sandero? It's a bit like comparing apples and oranges given the differences in taxation and various incentives and rates, and the fact that our car is one of the last pre-facelift versions. Setting all that aside, an LPG-powered Sandero stepway will cost €15,380, £13,490 in the Netherlands, compared with €15,980, £14,017 for a conventional petrol one. In the UK, a Sandero stepway is much cheaper to begin with: £8,995, £10,995 for this engine, depending on the trim before you consider the different taxation system. But when cars equipped with factory-fitted LPG tanks were sold in the UK at the turn of the century, they cost about £1,000, £1,200 more than their petrol-powered equivalents. Let's imagine that it would cost from £10,000 here. This will be the long-term test of the calculator and credit card as much as the car. How many LPG fuel stations are there? How does the economy compare with a petrol car? Is it really cheaper? How often do you have to fill up? How many people could benefit from switching to LPG? I'll be channeling my inner Carol Vorderman to find out. Dacia Sandero stepway LPG specification: specs, price new £13,490, price as tested £13,490, options none, test data: engine 898cc, turbocharged, petrol power 89 bhp, torque 103 pounds-ft, top speed 104 miles per hour, 062 mph, 11.1 sec, claimed fuel economy 55.4 mpg, test fuel economy 35.1 mpg, code 2 115 GKM, fault, stuck adapter fixed, expenses none, back to the top.